Hello, once again this is Hasenbraten making a video of 4 tables, no limit $5 on party poker, as you can see hopefully. Today we once again will be playing like straightforward tag and play by a starting hand chart pre-flop and then try to make the best possible post-flop. Here we flop a third pair to the board, kind of draw heavy flop heads up. I'm usually check folding once because I will lose the pot too often if I bet or check call the flop. But since my opponent checked behind, I'm betting a turn that does not decrease my equity too bad, like a king or an ace or a 9 or an 8 would, since I expect to have the best hand a lot, because usually people would bet at least a queen or literally every hand or most hands that have me beat do bet the flop usually. Flush draws often bet the flop, queens often bet the flop, jacks often bet the flop. Possibly he has like a better 10 maybe sometimes and just checks behind on the flop and then calls me on the turn even if I'm beat. But I guess this is more or less the only reasonable hand that checks behind on the flop and has me beat on the turn. Which of course does not mean that I'm going to invest a lot of money on the turn, because somebody can easily have slow played me, but usually people bet better hands on the flop. So against a reasonable hand that does not do something like a tricky slow play or something, I'm ahead on the turn, and though I'm betting for protection. Basically, I can't really bet for value since there is no worth made hand that will call my turn, but normally sometimes you will get like fancy with a pair of 5s on the turn or a pocket pair of 6s or 7s maybe, but usually made hands that call me on the turn have me beat. But I can bet against draws, against one card flush draws, against one card straight draws that possibly did not bet the flop. Well, here we have 4-3 suited. You might wonder why you shall raise 4-5 suited and you should forward 3-4 suited. Well, actually 4-3 suited does not make as many straights as 4-5 suited does, obviously. 4-5 suited doesn't even make as many straights as 5-6 does, if I'm right, because you can't make the one card. You can't make a 4-card top straight, but that doesn't change. Well, that is basically the reason why you don't raise 4-3 suited, why you raise 5-6 suited and 4-5 suited. Since it gets more obvious if you take, for example, the suited connector deuce tray. If you raise with deuce tray, you can make just as many straights as an ace king can, because you can never make the top end of a straight, which is also the difference between 4-5 and 3-4. 3-4 never is the top end of the straight, because the lowest straight existing is of course the wheel ace to 5, and ace to 5 obviously has not as top card 3-4. With 4-5 you can flop a top straight, which is obviously the wheel. And with deuce 3 you can just flop. Well, you can flop a straight ace to you can flop a straight ace to 5, where both of your cards are involved, and there is no better straight possible on the flop. You can flop a straight deuce to 6, where actually you have 2 better possible straights, because 3-7 makes a better straight and 7-8 also makes a better straight. And you can flop a straight, like a big straight deuce to 7 or 3-7, which count then, and obviously lots of hands make better straight then. So your straight making ability with deuce 3 is kinda limited, which is actually why you should fold it first in out of every position, and usually not even play it out of the small blind unless you get like real good odds. Doesn't seem to be too obvious on the first view, but if you think about it for a minute, you will actually see what I'm talking about. Here pocket 5s with one limper ahead, we of course just complete or just limp ahead, because we don't want to isolate here with a small pocket pair. We prefer on the low limits, we prefer to see a cheap flop here and try to play just if we hit, and not isolate with a small pocket pair where you actually don't have that big of an edge usually. So you are more or less committed to have some to fold EKT, and of course you don't have that much folding EKT on low limits, and especially not against the short stack. Though against somebody with his stack, I usually wouldn't even raise him while not playing with the starting hands chart, because his stack just kind of sucks. People with his stack often play really loose and do even call raises pre-flop, then out of position, and he will like never fold a better hand on the flop because the pot is going to be pretty big compared to his stack. Since I would raise like 20 cents, he calls, then the pot is 40 cents big and he just has like 90 cents or 100 cents left. So basically he'll be committed to any hit. Usually his hits are stronger than my hand, and since he will like never fold a better hand on the flop, and I even do sometimes get bluffed out if I have the best hand, because I can't stand action with pocket 5 much, I prefer to play his cheap pot here, since his stack usually will prevent other big stacks from raising. Those blinds here would be very inclined to try to play a cheap pot also with him in the pot, because they usually also know that he's pretty loose. He will not fold often, so they just can raise their big hands for value. Of course, with like aces or ace king or even maybe an ace jack or something, you can still raise because your hand has an EKT edge against his range, and you can play kind of well post-up, especially against his stack. But if you don't have a real value raising hand, you should just try to go ahead and play a cheap pot, because usually the others get kind of shut down too if there is such a small stack in the pot. It's a little bit like sit and go poker. When you get short in big blinds, of course he has more big blind than you do when it gets really short in sit and go poker. But it's kind of the same thing, because the bigger the blinds compared to your stack are, the more important it gets what your hand is like, and the less important it gets like what position you're in and what your implied odds are, and though, because all this goes down when it comes to when it comes to small stack poker. Well, here we could play a pot if nobody raised, but since somebody raised, we're just folding our 7-8 suited. Suited connectors are nice if you can play indeed a cheap pot, best in position, and see if you do flop something big like a straight or flush, or maybe a big draw. But if you will have to pay pre-flop to see a flop, it usually does not pay off often enough to make your pre-flop call justified. Here it's a situation against 3 people. I of course check fold my SI. Now things get a little bit different because we do have top pair now. Even though our top pair are the worst possible, I expect this to be good at least sometimes, and I don't want to check it and maybe check call against a better hand, or maybe check fold against the worse hand. It just all sucks. So I prefer to bet it for myself. I don't have to bet big though, because there's just the backdoor flush draw and that's it. King jack offsuit out of middle position gets folded, and ace jack offsuit from the button gets raised. King jack suited here out of position against one loose player, and of course according to the starting hands chart, I just check, and obviously I'm going to check fold my gut shot here. Makes no sense to bet, especially not if I do know that he's loose. Even if I didn't know that this short stack guy was loose, I wouldn't bet here. With the flush draw, of course, things would have gone different, because I could think of betting here, but with just a backdoor flush draw and the gut shot and 200 cards, it's not worth betting. Here we of course complete by starting hands chart. Just one guy left in the pot, who makes it kinda unlikely that there's going to be a raise, which we can't call. But this time there is, so I fold according to the starting hands chart. And well, down here it's kinda close now. Now we are 7 people and almost everybody has a full stack or more. So I'm going to stay here a few more minutes and see if maybe somebody coming to fill up the table. But 7-handed is like on the borderline to play if you want to play a full ring game, because things do start to get different here compared to a 10 max table. Differences get bigger if you get even shorter, though a 5-handed game is much different than a 7-handed game. But even a 7-handed game still is not a real full ring game, so usually we shouldn't be playing here. But as I said, it's borderline, and I'm going to wait at least a little bit until maybe somebody else joins the table. Or somebody leaves. If somebody leaves, I'm going to leave too, then it's just a 6 max table. And as you might have heard, short-handed is kind of bigger difference to full ring, and you shouldn't try to play short-handed if you're just new to poker, which I assume if you play like no limit $5. Here we have another small pocket pair with a limper ahead. We're not going to raise. I explained that earlier, and so we just tried to play a cheap pot and try to hit our set, which actually worked one time. So I'm going to bet here, of course. If everybody checks this flop, I'm often just getting everybody to fold here. But that's not the bad thing. You have to compare this possibility to the other ones. And the other ones are I'm giving free cards to to people that can easily draw out on me. There are several gut shot, flush draw, backdoor flush draw, and so on. Hands that do have actually outs against me and might even pay. And even if they don't pay, it's better for me to bet than not, of course, because those hands, if they don't pay me off on the flop when I'm ahead, they're not going to pay me off on the turn if I'm ahead. So the only thing I'm going to achieve there is keeping the pot small with a strong but vulnerable hand. So it would be a big mistake to check here. Here once again we have a small pocket pair out of middle position against some limpers. We just try to play small pot and hit. Small pot worked, hitting did not, so we folded. Pocket nines, of course, are stronger than the average small pocket pair, but still not really strong enough to raise them first in from middle position, especially not against limpers. Because of course your hand does have some value in itself, because pocket nines do win pots way more often than pocket deuces. If it comes to showdown, you do have indeed some showdown value with pocket nines. But raising from under the gun can take you into several situations where you don't want to be, because you easily can be out of position against multiple players and then maybe flop a weak overpair on a drawy board, and then you will be in kind of bad shape if money goes in, or if a lot of money goes in, because with pocket nines it's always possible somebody is having a bigger pocket pair than you, though you should be more aware of putting all your money in with an overpair of nines and an overpair of aces, because aces, of course, are at least the nut one pair hand, the best possible hand that contains just one pair, obviously. But pocket nines, of course, are being beat by every bigger pocket pair, and you just have one out. For whatever reason, somebody might just have called you preflop with a bigger pocket pair. With a hand like pocket tens or maybe pocket jacks, it doesn't even sound too bad just to call preflop if you raise from under the gun or middle position. Re-raising won't be necessary there, but those people do have you beat indeed. So this is the first part. The second part, which makes raising not too good, is that against some kind of big drawing hand, you might be even a dog, because somebody might have some overcards to you, adding some equity to his hand. Like, for example, you might know I like to use Poker Stove. So I'm doing it right now. If you have pocket nines and somebody has like ace jack of clubs and flops just a flush draw, so we have deuce of clubs, six of clubs, and the seven of spades, maybe. As you can see, he's a favorite over your hand, and he's still drawing, and he just had a flush draw. If we maybe add a pair to his flush draw, he might have some top pair, top kicker kind of hand. Whoa, now he has even less equity. Ah, well, of course, because his two overcards are more worth than his pair, obviously, because now he has one more out more. Sorry for that. We might add like a backdoor straight draw, which increases his equity by a bit. If we add a gut shot straight draw, of course, his equity exceeds by far. He now has 60% equity just by drawing. So, of course, you're not always in that bad of a shape. But even against a flush draw with overcards, that's something you should recognize. You should keep in mind that you're a dog against a flush draw with overcards in this situation. Against the bare flush draw with overcards. Not by far. Against just the flush draw, of course, with the dead money, it would be good to go all in. But depending on what your opponent is like, how strong he plays, the flush draw with overcards might be just the very worst hand he can have. If he has a range of like some flush draws with overcards and two pairs, sets and bigger pocket pairs, your equity goes down the road, and you just have maybe 30% or so. No situation where you want to go all in. So that's the difference. Of course, against a tight player, you might even think of folding aces, but aces do have a way better equity. If you put up the same situation like we did right now, and now we put him up against aces, the board was, I think, deuce of clubs, something like this, the board was, then we obviously do have 63% against 47, which is kind of a big difference in those situations where equities don't go up too much. It's always like the flush draw in this situation always has some kind of decent equity. So he can't be much more of a dog, actually. He's just more of a dog against the set, because the set can redraw. If obviously he has one running backdoor out against us, because he can win with running jacks, of course. If turn and river is a jack, I lose 2 trips, which I can't with this set. And the more important fact is that with the flush draw you have less outs against a set, because one of your flush outs is dead because it pairs the board and makes a full house, and B, because if you hit on the turn, your opponent still has a redraw on you, which I usually don't have. I just have if he hits against my overpair, I just have a very weak redraw. Sometimes I do have a redraw, just indeed, because if I hit on the turn, if I hit a set on the turn, my opponent hits his flush, I do have, of course, the full house outs, and if my opponent has, if the turn pairs the board, I have 4 outs to the river to make a full house. That's way worse. That's why you could consider folding aces, but you shouldn't consider folding a set there, of course. Ace king from first position and ace 10 out of late position. We read them both, and we have pocket deuces to just call the big blind with. Maybe hit another set here against this loose player. I don't know if he ever folded preflop since I'm at the table. Well, I'm pretty sure he did once or twice, but not really the amount he should be folding. Well, now what we're going to do. We are preflop aggressor on 2 tables. On one we get donk bet into. Well, here we cannot fold, of course. I'm going to, well, first of all, I'm going to make my continuation bet here, because I still have overcards and a gut shot straight draw, and I see, of course, a lot of hands folding here. Of course, some hands can call, obviously, but I'm winning the pot sometimes. Wow, now I folded. Of course, I'm winning the pot sometimes. And of course, I get called sometimes. But even if I get called against every hand, I have outs here. And which is more important, I'm obviously not losing the pot well, that's just what I said. I'm not losing the pot if I get a check call, because I sometimes do have a lot of outs with my overcards being live, and sometimes I do have at least 4 outs to the jack, which makes me the nut straight. Wow, it was just with 3 outs, since he might have a better hand with a flush draw. And then the jack of clubs is no out, but usually then I either have the ace or the king live. So even if this happens, I'm still having more than 4 outs, which makes betting okay here, I think. With like pocket 9s or something, for whatever reason I might have them, I'm not betting, because I'm not winning the pot often enough if I get called. I prefer betting ace king here. Also because the pots I win with my ace king, if I hit, are usually bigger, because I improve more often, and I think I can win a slightly bigger pot if I hit with the ace king than with the 9. Because the 9 of course completes an open-ended straight draw, and then I might be even an underdog if I hit, and kinda sucks. In this situation it's kinda standard fold for me. I isolate one limper, I flop an overcard with a gut shot, and the board appears to be pretty bad to be bluffing at, because me being the preflop aggressor and this not being a real steal situation makes my range usually kinda tight. And this will not make my opponent's possible bluffs very very profitable, because I will often have a king or a queen, or even better to call a raise here. So I expect him on this limit to very often just have at least a pair, usually at least a top pair or a second pair kind of hand, and he's not going to fold them often enough. Or maybe he has like just a flush draw, maybe flush draw with a gut shot or something, some strong draw where I don't want to play against, because I don't have like any strong outs. I just have 3 out in this situation, and on this board I expect to lose way more often with an ace on the turn. I expect to lose way more often than with a king or an ace down here. And of course his line is like way stronger. Well, here our expert loose master just slow played his trips top kicker hard. I think his opponent led twice. He just called and then small raised the flush river, which of course is kind of bad. It was a limp pot. He called the turn bet, then he checked behind on the flop with trips and top kicker and a flush draw out there. He checked behind. Then I checked the turn because I still have nothing. His opponent bets a small amount, he just calls, and then he raises a river donk on the flush. And his opponent even has trips with second best kicker. So they both slow played their trips on the flop hard. Well, this is kinda senseless. This is you should just to make people like me not making fun of you. You should bet your trips in this situation. It's a small pot, your hand is vulnerable, and your hand is strong. And especially on this limit, there are lots of worth hands that can call you. Pocket pairs, flush draws, maybe just overcards calling you to hit a pair. This is a situation where you seriously need to protect, and where you seriously need just to put some money into the pot. Well, here I've put myself into some bad situation. I cold called a minimum raise preflop because of having good odds, and now I have top pair top kicker on against 3 opponents. This is a situation I like to lead because my lead is pretty strong, and I force my opponents to act according to their hand strengths. Here I'm going to re-raise to like 4 times what he raised, like round about here. And I just go all in with kings here, of course. Well, now I get a call by a kind of small stack. He's last to act, and this is a situation where I'm going to be playing for stacks actually, because his deck is pretty small. Even if I'm beat, I don't lose too much money. The turn card is kind of perfect for me, because now quads of course get less likely. The set of 5 gets less likely, so the only hands beating me are just jacks, 9s, and a bigger overpair, which is all pretty unlikely by the preflop action. So I'm just betting and putting them all in on every river. Well, I think I'll just pot it here and go with the hand. The pot is just too big to give it up right now, even though I might be beat by somebody sucking me out on the flop, or maybe somebody even having aces and misplaying them pre-flop. But I don't see how I can not bet here, and since my bet anyways commits me, I'm just going to bet big so I can call the shove easily. But here, after a short thought process, he's calling my river bet. Against him having just like less than three quarters of the pot left, I'm just putting him all in because I expect his kind of hand to call every time. Even if a flush hits on the river, I'm still betting him all in because I expect his hand still to call even if the flush hits. And if I check, he usually won't bet, but he will with his hand. So I win nothing from worse hands usually. But he may very well, of course, bet his flush, and I will be forced to call by pot odds. So if I will call his all-in usually anyways, I can just put the money in myself if he is going to be more likely to call than to bet a worse hand. And in this situation with the flush coming in, he of course is way more likely to make kind of stand-up hero call instead of a stupid bluff with less than pot size left, when my line looks pretty strong. So this is a special situation where I could go broke with top pair, top kicker. If some bigger stack had called me on the flop or even raised me, of course, as I said, I was bet folding the flop. If somebody raises me on this flop in a pot this small and so many people in it, I'm just folding because I'm going to be an underdog way too often if I call, so I would fold. But with a small stack calling me last to act, I expect to be ahead often enough to put my money in, which actually was the right move this time. Of course, next time maybe it's not, but I expected to be plus EV to play the hand the way I did. Here, pocket eights out of middle position. No matter if or if not the limper limped, we would have tried to limp into the pot. And now it's going to be a minimum raised family pot. Unfortunately, it's not a queen 8 flop, but a queen 9 flop. So we can just give our hand up, obviously. Makes not much sense calling here. And this is one more situation where I expect to have the best hand, but I strongly need to protect my hand against one card flush draws. So now the question whether or not I call this minimum bet. I think I'll do even if it's pretty close. Maybe it's even wrong. Reasons to do it are of course I have really good odds. Reasons not to do it are I might be drawing dead, which is unlikely but possible. I mainly did it because it's kinda likely somebody is having a hand like Jack 10, and if an 8 comes on the turn, it's kinda unlikely, but my pot odds are really good and my implied odds are good also. So if somebody's having Jack 10 and I spike an 8 on the turn or on the river with a check through on the turn, I might win his whole stack by making a full house and him making top straight. But I don't expect to be ahead here very often, so I just check behind, of course, on the turn and check fold on the river. He's having me beat way too often to call. I think this is pretty clear. I don't think you should really think of calling here with a pair of 8s. I would rather bet the turn than call the river, actually. Because the river brought another bad card for me, I think. And he might even be bluffing with the best hand, like a 9 or maybe a 10. And I might sometimes get a better hand to fold on the turn, like maybe a pair of jacks or some pockets that are scared. But also this is pretty unlikely to get the history right now. But on the turn, no. It's just jacks that might fold the turn, and even they don't usually because they have an open-ended straight draw. So I don't see no reason to bet. I think this is a line where you on this limit you like more or less always see either queen, a full house, or at least aces or kings by his line. Of course, sometimes you see some strongly misplayed ace king or something, but that's basically it. Well, now I'm having 30 hands of this guy. I just looked up in Poker Tracker and he has like 83% VPIP and 0 preflop raise, so he plays like more or less any two, which of course is nice for me, because against those people you usually have a big edge. They play hard, very hard losing poker. Now it's a question whether or not to bet, but since he appears to be a real big fish, I'll be bet folding my pair on the flop. Then usually I will be bet folding my pair on the river, and then I will be check folding the bet folding on the turn, and then I will be check folding on the river if right blanks or something come. Mainly because I expect him to be able to call me even twice with a worse hand, and I don't expect him to be aggressive enough to try to bluff me then on the river. I neither expect him to be able to bluff raise me in any point of the hand, so my second pair of cards won't be played as a bluff catcher against the raise or something by this guy. I'm just trying to value bet him hard, extract the most possible value, and against those players I'm immediately giving up if I get action. With a hand like this, of course. Here ace-2 suited, completed out of the small blind, and then obviously check folded to a made flush. I don't think there is much to tell you about this. I think it's pretty clear, should be standard. Well, kind of biggish pot those two played there. I'm interested in how it got so big. Well, of course he calls preflop. Several people call. Then he check calls flop. And then turn goes check check. He check called with a gut shot. Then turn goes check check, and river he led into a small amount with hitting the pair of fours. And the other guy semi-bluffing the flop with the same gut shot, calling with the same pair. Queen 10 offsuit out of late position. We would have raised first in actually, but against somebody else raising, we just fold this hand. I think I did often explain why playing a hand like Queen 10 offsuit against the raise usually is no good idea. Especially not in those situations where you're more or less just 100 big blinds deep. Oh wow, we are even almost 150 big blinds deep. But even this does not make it a good play calling with an ace queen offsuit, and Queen 10 offsuit. Ace queen offsuit would have been another hand. Still a fold by the starting hands chart, which is really tight. But if you get like more advanced, you could think of re-raising somebody, open raising from a late middle position, and you having such a hand and such stack size. Because if you call, well, in fact you have one good thing, because you do have position and you can sometimes use your position right post flop. But I usually prefer to 3-bet in pre-flop, because I also can get into very tough situations when I hit some kind of strongish hand that's of course not 150 big blind strong. Or what I mean by this is that it's not strong enough to play a pot where I have to invest 150 big blinds, but still is indeed a strong hand, and then I might have some problems whether to call or fold, or whether to raise or fold. Sometimes can get me into bad situations. And on the other hand, obviously I just hit 1 out of 3 flops, so in 2 out of 3 flops I'm usually either committed to be bluffing or just folding my hand on the flop, which also made me lose money because I invested some money pre-flop to at least see the flop. So folding there, of course, is not bad. Queen 10 offsuit out of middle position, the fold too, as well as 7-4 suited. Well, we still have a few more minutes left. I can make a summary right now for what I played so far. It's once again been really tight, really aggressive, and this time winning. I won a little bit more than 100 big blinds over a period of 150 hands, and I voluntarily put money in the pot in 11% of the cases. Preflop raised even less than 5% of my hands and have a total aggression of 10. I just saw the showdown in 4.5% of the cases when I saw the flop, but then I won them all. But I think it was just one showdown I saw. Went to showdown filter, and it was just one showdown with ace jack offsuit, you might remember. So not all too much happened, but this of course is also something you should get used to if you're willing to play poker. Well, if you're willing to play online poker, you of course do need to be very, very cautious and very well. You need some time. You do have to be able to wait in certain situations, even longer than you want to wait, and even longer than you thought you would have to wait. Wow. Bet the river with pocket deuces. I think he bet all the time, and he got called by a worse hand. All the way down. Nice hand. You always have to wait a lot in poker. Even you do even have to wait way more if you play live poker than online poker, because online, while playing just 36 minutes, I played 160 hands, even more. I'm just getting a new import. Even more than 160 hands. While live you play like maybe 30 or 40 hands an hour. If it goes fast, maybe a little bit more, but you will never reach this number of hands per hour. And this was just four-tabling the lowest possible limit on party poker. Full ring. It was not short-handed, it was no high limit, it was just 4 tables. You can increase the number of hands, of course, way better online than offline. So in any ways, you need a lot of a word. I just know the German word, so I'm just gonna do some quick translation so I can tell you the word, because it's kind of embarrassing for me not to know it. 1 second. I'm using a translator right now. Is there a German to English translator? German to English. I'm just going to laugh if I know the word right now. Patience. I meant patience all the time, of course. You need a lot of patience. Wow. This kind of sucks, losing with kings to an ace-king offsuit. Where did the money go in? Was it the real suck-out or not? It was a real suck-out. They went all in pre-flop. That's kind of bad, of course. On the flop, the ace-king guy, even just having ace-king high, of course, has a lot more EKT than pre-flop, because on the flop he has he has 1 overcard to the pair of kings, and he has a flush draw, and he even had a backdoor straight draw, if I got this right. So he has a couple of outs and is not that big of a dog. If he put this up again, well, the kings guy is just 55% favorite, so it's not that big of a deal losing this hand. Pre-flop, of course, one more poker stove used in this video. We have an ace-king offsuit against pocket kings, and it is 30-60. So obviously the equity of the ace-king guy increased a lot on the flop. But since I went all in pre-flop, it just makes no sense considering this, obviously. Because your equity on the flop does not matter if you go all in pre-flop. You can't consider something. Well, it's like if you go all in pre-flop with like 10s and your opponent has aces, the flop comes 10 high and he rivers you with an ace. You can't consider it a suck out because you were behind when the money went in. This is no suck out. It's just fair. I'd say in the long run, it's just fair if you do lose the pot with a worse hand. On the other hand, if you go all in on the flop, it would be kind of suck out. Well, now we have another interesting hand. Open raising pocket jacks from under the gun. I don't think it's like interesting. But now we get a squeeze play by some totally unknown opponent. I actually don't expect the average play on this limit to be moving here, so I do give him credit for a made hand, and the made hands for people squeezing people raising from under the gun usually are way better than pocket jacks on average. I expect him to have a range like ace king and queens are better or something like this. And obviously pocket jacks don't play good against this range. Calling preflops, though, since I expect to be that way behind against this range, calling preflop would just be for set value, but I can't of course call for set value with those odds, because here he made a real re-raise. Well, I think I'm going to stop this video right now. I hope you had a good time watching it and you learned something. On the overall results, nothing did change much. But of course, I still hope you learned something and you enjoyed it. Maybe watch another video of mine. And I hope you had no difficulties to understand me. Obviously, I'm not a native speaker, but I still think my English is good enough, at least, for you to understand it. Thank you for watching.